Warning: some spoilers lie ahead for Predator: Badlands. After nearly 40 years of leaving audiences terrified of their potential existence, Predator: Badlands delivers the first-ever Yautja protagonist to root for, and the team behind the film put plenty of thought into his creation. Being set on the alien planets of Yautja Prime and Jenna, the movie is led by New Zealand actor Demetrius Schuster-Kolamatangi as Dek, the runt of his tribe and outcast on the verge of execution. Directed by Dan Trachtenberg on a script from Patrick Ason, who he developed the story with, Predator: Badlands has garnered largely positive reviews from critics. One of the more notable elements praised has been the movie's emotional approach to making Dek the franchise's first-ever Yautja protagonist, with some comparing it favorably to that of the T-800's role in Terminator 2: Judgment Day. As the film continues to prove a box office hit, Screen Rant's Grant Hermans interviewed VFX supervisor Sheldon Stopsack and animation supervisor Carl Rapley from VFX to discuss Predator: Badlands. In looking at the movie's depiction of its Yautja protagonist, particularly the use of facial replacement, rather than solely going for a prosthetic mask, Rapley began by acknowledging the challenge of making an audience empathize and respond to that creature. Recalling one of Arnold Schwarzenegger's iconic quotes from the original film, Carl Rapley, "You go back to the '87 Predator and what they could do with animatronics then." As Arnold said, "You're a one ugly mother effer. How do you make an audience empathize and respond to that creature?" The movie was going to live or die on that. It was about trying to create an emotional response with the audience and make him something you could connect to. In getting to utilize more CGI than the early Predator movies, Rapley felt that the VFX team fell into a unique trap in which you're trying to give yourself boundaries and give yourself a range. No more important in that is Dek's facial expressions, which Rapley praised Schuster-Kolamatangi for delivering an amazing performance that we could build around. From there, Rapley and the rest of the animation team worked to find analogs of human expressions to transfer across to Dek. Describing the process as being both an interesting journey and one of trial and error, Rapley says the team ultimately found less was more effective for much of Dek's facial performances. Recalling their conversations with Trachtenberg, the goal they all agreed on was a balance of trying to find something that would honor the history of the franchise, as well as push it a little bit further. They also were afraid of straying too far with their Yautja character and make it cartoony. A Stopsack chimed in to assure there are still a lot of practical prosthetic effects put into Dek's creation for Predator: Badlands, with the team having pondered if they could tap into the original animatronic approach to things with the movie's CGI. This subsequently led to early tests to figure out how much could be done practically versus with VFX, with it having become pretty obvious that the demands of Dek as an emotional character meant we needed to have the ability to tap into CG. Sheldon Stopsack: "We had to broaden things, to open it up and get into more depth for his emotions and expressiveness. That's really where Carl and his team did their absolute magic translating Demetrius' performance, which was an anchor that was already an incredibly strong foundation for us. But how do you translate something from a human actor's performance into something that is anatomically and inherently not human? You have to find this bridge for interpretation. That was artistically driven, and it's all keyframed effectively." Rapley further pointed out that one of the trickier elements for the animation team was having a character without lips, as well as having mandibles, which led them to determining a way to get the same consonants and same sounds that an audience can believe in. One scene, in particular, Rapley is proud of for how it conveys the Yautja's emotions, is Dek's crash landing on Jenna, in which, after he's launched from his ejection pod, it's just him for a long time, reacting and processing. As he lay there in pain and frustration, Dek has to go through a full range of emotions with the Predator: Badlands protagonist experiencing everything from a feeling of beaten down to what the hell's going on to processing his brother's death. This all ultimately culminates in his explosion of full-on anger being cut short as he begins to realize the danger of his environment. Rapley recalls the scene being a big task for all involved, particularly given it's a very long take, and required the team committing to the journey. Stopsack confessed that he didn't want to single out one performance that he and the Weta team worked on for Deck in the film, as he praised there being so many that I wouldn't really do them justice and be fair. That being said, he did point out the importance of the movie's crash scene as allowing viewers to start actually seeing a bit of a different personality in Deck, compared to the more aggressive and ferocious emotions seen in the movie's opening on Yautja Prime. Sheldon Stopsack. You see anger and vulnerability, and that range continues from there. It's almost like you're being slowly eased into the broad range that you ultimately get to see from Deck in the movie. It eases the audience into getting used to seeing different emotions from him, and that continues when Deck is looking after his wounds, or when he's playing with the glowworms, and you all of a sudden see his surprise. The Predator's emotions slowly build up, and it makes the audience more and more comfortable seeing a different side of him. I think it works absolutely brilliantly. Screen Rant. This franchise went to streaming briefly for Prey before coming back to the big screen. What was it like getting to be a part of its big screen return? Carl Rapley. I was a Dan Trachtenberg fan for a while. I had seen 10 Cloverfield Lane and Prey, and I knew he was a kid of the 80s and 90s who was also into video games like me. So, I wanted to get a chance to work with them, and I was like, maybe something will come up, and Weta can fit that gap. And it did. This project came along, and I jumped on it. I was like, yeah, I want to be part of that. Being an 87 and Predator fan as well, it's one of those touchstones for my generation growing up. I loved being part of it, and this one was quite unique in terms of how it flipped the script. Audiences responded to that, which was great. In this movie, we zig when everyone thought we were going to zag, and it was really gratifying to see the public reaction. Sheldon Stopsack. Yeah, I came in from a slightly different angle than Carl, because I didn't know quite as much about Dan as Carl did. And while I fully admit that I'm a fan of the Predator franchise, I'm really a big fan of the original. I was also a kid of the 80s and 90s, so you really grow up with this idea of the OG Predator movie. There's a big high bar there, but as I got my head around it, watching Prey in anticipation of getting involved in this one gave me a glimpse of what Dan is capable of and what he's up to. And then, as Carl alluded to, reading the script and understanding that this is actually a very different twist was really exciting to see. That got me excited to segue into our journey, Screen Rant. As far as the Predator franchise goes, I feel like that power loader fight is the biggest scale fight of any film. How did you make sure it didn't feel too big for what is a rather grounded Predator movie? Carl Rapley. My first meeting with Dan was talking about exactly that sequence, and his initial pitch was for the film to be quite a bit shorter. I think it was maybe about 90 minutes, so it had to be quite punchy. He talked through the beats, the exchange of blows, and the reversals that needed to happen. And then we went away with a small team here and just hammered out the beats, trying to find the most engaging way to tell the story. We were talking about Jurassic Park, and we were referencing Last of the Mohicans, in terms of fights that are decided by one move, or that are quite short and punchy. That was a touchstone for Dan, these two titans coming together. We were placing the camera low to pre-visit, and trying to show the weight of these two creatures, but also involve Deck, and have him scurrying around and doing his thing. Dan didn't want the hero to be outside of the arena, so there was the challenge of trying to fit him in as well. Honestly, it was a lot of fun to put together. We had about 5 weeks to work on that, and then they went out in the middle of the night to filming it on a farm 1 hour outside of Auckland. That was crazy! Then we got those plates back and started post-production, animating and Sheldon making it look beautiful. It was such a cool fight to be part of.